So the next thing we need to do is, where does this IK control need to go? Well, it's got to go the same position rotation as this joint here. Well, that's pretty easy. I mean, we can select that. We can, we can get these transforms using XForm in Mel, and then paste it on the here. But the trick is, how does this know that it's got to go here? There's nothing connecting these two. They're just two objects floating around in space. And more importantly, I mean, we could always, look for the IK handle, go to the effector, yada yada yada. But what if this was not perfectly lined up to this? What if we had to create a marker, and we'll see situations where we'll have to do that. Again, going back to the foot control, maybe the foot control doesn't orientate properly to the end joint, and its rotations are more ambiguous. So what I would do in that case is I would create a marker, parent it to that joint, so it would match these positions and orientations. But then we still have the same problem of, how do we tell it that marker is there? So long story short, I'm rambling, I know, sorry. We have to find a way of saying this is related to this. And again, not that it's related to joint 3, but this is going to represent where this control needs to be when we switch. It doesn't necessarily have to be this joint, it could be anything, but in this case it is that joint. So how do we tell these two that there's a relationship there? I took a very long way to get to that point. Sorry about that. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to connect that through a message attribute. And if you look at your IK handle, you'll see an example of a message attribute right here. You see the RP solver message goes into the IK handle's IK solver attribute. So Maya actually uses them all the time. Unfortunately, they're a little bit of a secret, because if you come up in here to the add attribute, message is just not an option. So we're going to have to do that manually through Mel. So down here on the command line, we're going to go add adder, attribute type, message, and then we're going to call it IK switch marker. I believe that's what I'm calling them. Yes. Oh, that's right, because it's going to be long name. I'm going to give it a short name of, let's see, I think I was kind of IK switch. IK marker, like that. I think that's the short name I was giving him. Okay. And that warning is basically because this thing already had it on it at one point, and there it is right there. There's your IK switch marker. So you can ignore that. That's not really important right now. So there's your IK switch marker attribute. And then if you come up to the hypergraph, and then it's a simple matter of IK switch marker, IK switch marker. So now when it comes time to switching from IK to FK, you're going to have our IK controller, and then we're going to say, okay, what do we have to match it to? And it's going to look for that attribute, follow the connection, and say, okay, we have to match it to that. That is our, this represents our position and rotation that we have to snap it to. So let's look at the pole vector a little bit. This is the third issue. And as you might think, we're going to do basically the same thing. We're going to create an empty group node. And I'm going to call that pole vector marker. Now you can call it anything you want, and that brings up an important point. Why are we not doing this name-based? Why don't we just not look for something called pole vector control underscore match to here or something like that? I don't like using naming conventions. They're really easy to break. and they're just, I don't like them. They're easy to break. You got to take into account namespace. If you have an object that has already that name, it's going to rename it something else, so you won't even have the name you thought you had. Doing things through connections is much quicker, it's much more reliable, and it's much more cleaner. So we're going to snap the pole vector marker to our pole vector control. Now remember, pole vectors are position only. We don't have to worry about rotation. So where is that little guy going to go? I got it right there so I can find it again. Where is he going to go? Well, if you remember from the last video, when you move the pole vector, I got the IK off, turn that back on. When you move the pole vector, all your rotations are coming from the top joint. None of the other joints are rotating. So if we pop that pole vector marker as a child of that, then as we move that in FK, so if we move this joint in FK, this is going to come along for the ride, and that's going to represent where the pole vector control should be in order to line everything back up again. And then it comes down to creating that message attribute again. Now this time, instead of IK switch marker, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to add, get out of there. Pole vector marker. And then we connect them up. Pole vector marker. Yeah, okay. Yep, there we go. Okay. So why is that a second name? Why did I not use IK switch marker? I could have, but I prefer to have it separate because pole vectors have a different subroutine than the IK handles, and it just made it a little easier to not have to search for IK switch markers and then try to figure out if I had an IK handle or an IK controller and a pole vector controller. Since they have separate attributes, I can tell just by searching for the attribute which one was which. Just made it a little easier for me in the mail code. Not a hard requirement. Again, once you get into this, you may go, hey, you know, this would have been a lot easier if Chad had just done this. Hey, knock yourself out. I'm sure there's plenty of room to optimize this. Don't take anything as granted, you know, that this is unchangeable. Rigging is an art in of itself, and everybody's got their own way of doing it and their own opinion of what's good and bad. So if you're really junior, you're going to have to evolve your own style and your own taste and see what actually works best for you. So don't take this necessarily as gospel or anything. So that's basically the rig. And we turn around and we'll save this as simple IK with pole vector underscore final is what we want to save that as. I won't because it's already there, but and if you open that up, you can see everything with the connections.